Fantastic to be here and really great to have been able to support this event. And it's great to be by the seaside. It's not looking particularly sunny, but maybe go for a swim later. So I want to talk to you about nudge theory and behavioural science and applying that to the world of security awareness. And the reason why I want to talk about that will become clear. But essentially my concern is that if you've got your security awareness wrong, if you're doing the wrong sort of thing here, you really could potentially just be wasting your staff's time. And I'll draw out why that's the case. As Hazel said, I'm Tim Ward, CEO, co-founder of Red Flags. We used to be called Think Cyber. We're just in the process of rebranding. So let's crack on. What is nudge theory? So some of you have probably come across this famous book by Thaler and Sunstein. And nudge theory is this idea of steering people to make decisions that are essentially in their best interest. So it's about sort of change management. And it's the sort of a contrast with the idea of kind of trying to force people to do it. So a very simple example that any parents in the room will understand. You could shout at your children to get them to tidy their room, or you could play the tidy up game. And you get the same outcome, but one is just kind of like steering the environment to get the outcome. One is creating a bit of conflict. Some other examples there. So if you wanted to try and budget, then that's quite hard, like keeping track of the money and things like that. And it's difficult to do. But when you go shopping, you could just take a basket instead of using a trolley when you go to the supermarket. The same with dieting, keeping track of calories and stuff like that. That's difficult. Maybe just use a smaller plate. And so these are ways where you shape the environment. So there's this concept of choice architecture. So every decision we make in our lives is shaped by the environment around us. And so if you can shape that environment, you will actually help people make decisions. And I'll do some more examples in a second, and you'll see how that really works. So the first message here is that you are communicating with people anyway in the world of cybersecurity. So just a little bit of an understanding of this can make your messaging much more powerful. Now, nudge theory has kind of evolved since it was initially talked about. And one of the evolutions of it that I really like is this concept of a boost. Because some nudges could be seen as quite manipulative. You're just kind of trying to steer the environment to get people to do what you want. But the idea of a boost is it's using those techniques, but it's also trying to enforce your ability and upgrade your ability. So the next time you encounter this situation, you make the decision and you're empowered and you understand it and you're learning at the same time. So boosts are a really nice addition to nudge theory. So let's look at some examples. So let's go to the supermarket. You get to the supermarket, there's something right in front of you, or there's something at the till, there's something at eye level. You might not be thinking much about that, but the supermarket is thinking very hard about what it puts at your eye level. Things it knows you're going to buy, it knows you're going to search out and you'll go and find them. But the things it wants you to buy, where it gets its highest margins, it's going to put at eye level and make really visible. There's been some really interesting nudge theory about hand washing. In particular, there was an abattoir in Brazil, in particular. It's quite an interesting one, where they had a real issue that people weren't kind of getting the cleanliness right. And so at the beginning of their breaks, they would stamp on their hand a picture of a germ with a nice inky stamp. And when people went back to the floor afterwards, if that germ was still there, there was a bit of social proof, so colleagues were going, you don't wash your hands, but also it kind of felt a bit yucky having this germ on their hands. So really good kind of way of shaping the environment. Google have been up to this recently. So it turns out giving your staff free food is not particularly good for their health. And so they realised this and they wanted to kind of change the environment a little bit, but they didn't want to take stuff away because that would have upset everyone. So what they did was that they moved the M&Ms into opaque canisters and they put the nuts and the fruit in clear canisters. And the same with the drink. So that the water was obvious and easy to find. The soda and stuff was in a cupboard at the bottom behind opaque glass. And it really shifted the way in which people were eating those things. They didn't force them. They didn't say they couldn't have those things. Some great visual examples, so trying to get people to not litter. Now I have to admit that I did actually take that photo. So if you get into nudge theory and you see something like this, you just got to capture it. So this, if you can't see, is a tiny little ball on a little dangling around inside a goal, and quite why us gentlemen need things like that to stop us making a mess on the floor, I don't know. But yeah, so that's an example of nudge theory. And in fact, the first kind of real experiment here was the fly on the urinal, again, that was trying to... So seriously, it's obviously an issue that hasn't been resolved yet. You will have all seen this wandering around London, and this one really helpful. You do have to get your messaging right, otherwise you could actually cause quite serious accidents. So why does nudge theory work? So it's this concept of bounded rationality that Kahneman and Tversky really probably got into the most initially. And we think that we make really rational decisions, but actually our brain is a little bit lazy. And it's because it's getting thrown all this information at it all the time, and so it takes shortcuts. So a classic one would be, are you buying this product because you really want the product, or are you buying it because you find the celebrity advertising attractive and you want to be like them? And your mind sometimes makes much easier decisions. Do I like this person? Or instead of, do I actually need this product? And so that laziness means that we have these kind of rules of thumb that help us make decisions really quickly. They call them heuristics. And those heuristics can lead to cognitive biases. So some examples, if we've seen something in the press, like a plane crash, we all have a heightened view of how likely that sort of thing is to happen. That's availability bias. Salience, if something's kind of bright and flashing, then we give more tribute and more emphasis to that thing because it's salient, it's in our mind. We all think bad things won't happen to us. Emotion is a really strong driver of decisions. That's why people use kind of kittens and things like babies on advertising and things like that. Authority, we all do what figures in authority tell us to do, generally. It's why you see men in white coats advertising toothpaste, things like that. So lots of these things, and you'll recognise these from the bad guys. The bad guys are using this against us in phishing simulations all the time. So CEO fraud is authority bias, social proof, that kind of urgency as well. And so these can be really impactful, but why can't we use these ourselves to do good? So the government got really into this idea of nudge theory, and they got some academics to build a model. And the idea with Mindspace is that each letter in Mindspace stands for a different way of steering and influencing behaviour. I'm not going to go through these in great detail, but the M of Mindspace was the messenger. We're influenced by who it is who's giving us the message. Is it someone in authority? Is it someone we trust? That needn't necessarily be an expert. It might be that you can leverage the expertise or the people who are well liked or well thought of in your organisation to deliver messages. Incentives, that's not just about the kind of positive incentives actually, but we all fear loss. That's why that kind of urgent phishing email works on people. As you've been locked out of your account, and that loss makes you go, and you click instead of thinking. Social norms I've talked about. Defaults is a great nudge. Make the secure route the easy default route. Salience, we've talked about. Priming, you can steer people's behaviour just by kind of showing that as they go to do an action. And I'll show you a real example of that in a second. Emotion, I've talked about. We're really good at sticking to commitments. So if we say we're going to do something, we follow through on that. So there's ways that you can get people to sort of think of themselves as cyber savvy and sort of say, yeah, I'm cyber savvy. And then they will try and stay true to that identity that they've taken on. And so that model was a little bit too complicated. It had quite a lot of letters, so they got sent away and come up with a much simpler model, the EAST model. So the letters of the EAST model stand for a nudge has to be nudging you towards an easy behaviour. It has to be an attractive behaviour, something you want to do. It has to be social, like are other people doing it? But a really important element came in here, which is timeliness. So you want to be nudging people as close to the point that they're actually making the decision as you possibly can. And that's really important. I'll come back to that in a second. So let's think about actually applying nudge theory. Well, look, you are in a cyber context already communicating with your staff. So why not just look at how you can use some of these models to improve the impact and effectiveness of that messaging? There's lots of different cognitive biases you can play to. Reciprocity is a great one. The cyber team have blocked this much phishing. You do your bit by reporting anything you see that's suspicious. So you've given a gift and you're asking for something back in return. So here's a great example from a really good book. If you're into nudge theory, I'd recommend reading, but called Ripple by Groom and Vellacott. And you read this and you think, that would never work on me. But for Tesco, getting a 10% uplift in the number of people who sign up for their £8 a month delivery saver, that's going to be a lot of money. And so the first thing they did in this message, that they were already sending this email anyway, so they might as well get it right, is they framed it as a loss. Don't miss out on this thing. And then they had this friendly delivery driver. I love this idea of being in a hot state because you're getting your groceries delivered, but that was the concept that they had. So it makes you feel good. Smiling face, we mimic that positivity. The eyes in the face were looking towards the message, which was that people save money. And then this is fascinating, this idea that using a really precise number implies authority. So it could just be 75% and you go, yeah, whatever, but that doesn't really apply to me. If it's that precise, it must be true, mustn't it? And this gave them that 10% uplift. So why on earth am I talking about nudge theory? What's this got to do with cybersecurity? Well, look, when we do traditional training, it relies on the theory of planned behaviour, which is another behaviour model that says when you learn something, that impacts your intention to act in a particular way. You go, well, I know how to do this, therefore I'm going to act in a particular way. And so we've been working on this idea that I learned to do something, I know how to be secure, therefore I will be secure all the time. The problem is that's not how we actually behave in real life. Context interferes. And that could be in a macro level context of your organisation. So there's a really interesting study by someone called Carlson, who was looking at whether people followed their security policies or not. And they surveyed people, and they all said yes, they followed the policies, and then they looked at whether they did. And in an organisation where the macro context was kind of delivery at all costs, that's all that mattered, unsurprisingly, people weren't really following the policies. So the context of the organisation really shapes things. But as I've been alluding to, so does the micro context. So does that little context in your day-to-day work about what's actually going on. Is there some sort of urgency in the message that you've received? Have you been primed to be thinking about something? And so people don't really make decisions based on the e-learning that they did 6 months ago. So another really interesting model that helps us think about how we apply some of this, and it's very similar to the East model, is Fogg's model. So he says that for any behaviour to take place, and obviously we want a secure behaviour, there's got to be an element of motivation, do I want to do it? An element of ability, can I do it? But again, some sort of prompt. And what's really interesting here for cybersecurity is that we've all been trying to get behaviours by focusing on motivation. And Fogg says don't start with motivation. And we use motivation in terms of we're scaring people to get them to behave in the way they want. Fogg says that motivation is actually the hardest lever of change. And I think you could kind of reflect on that in that you might want to be fit, you want to go to the gym, but you want to eat cake. And these two things clash, and I'm not sure which one's going to win. And so you have competing motivations all the time. People might want to act securely, but their boss might be saying, you need to get this report done by the end of the day. So you go, oh, I need to email it home to myself. And so order really matters. If you could start with a prompt and just gently nudge someone and they do the secure behaviour, you don't even need to think about ability and motivation. That's not always going to work. So next step, make it easy. And finally, once you've done that, think about motivation. Another one, to use that in your real life, and I do this and Fogg talks about it, is if you want to get yourself to the gym or go for a run, at night, put your gym kit next to the bed. And then when you get up in the morning, you see it, that's your prompt. If you then put it on and go for the run, sorted. Next step, put it on. Now you've got the ability. You can go for a run at any point you want. All you need now is motivation. Now, obviously, I have worn my gym kit around the house all day and not actually gone for the run at times, but I could have done. And so it's just that sequence of events that makes the behaviour easy. So if we look at this graph that Fogg talks about, and the prompt has got to bring you over this line to get you to behave, you can think about the fact that if you're highly motivated, you can do really difficult things. If you're not very motivated, then those things need to be easy. And if we think about where secure behaviours sit on here, sadly, they sit up here. We're not very motivated to do them. And that's not because we don't want to be secure, but again, it's that competing motivations in our life. The boss is breathing down your neck because you've got to get something done. And so we have to make it easy to act securely. So let's try and apply that to an example, excuse me, of safe email use. And let's do it in the order that Fogg talks about. So firstly, the prompt. Timeliness is key. If I want people to behave securely in their email, then I need to tell them about it in their email, not 6 months earlier in a training course that was completely abstract and not in their email. And so really the essence of this is you're kind of trying to say, look, think carefully about this link you're about to click, or as you go into your inbox, remember to report phishing. You're just kind of keeping this salient and getting it in people's heads. Then we need to think about ease. And what's important with ease is giving people a really important out, a really important coping mechanism. And generally with phishing is that if you're not sure, just ask. It's fine to ask. Report it and we'll check for you. And I don't think you should really be overcomplicating it, because as AI gets involved in phishing sims, they're going to get better and better and better. And so expecting people to spot really difficult things, it's not going to work. You just need to build that healthy skepticism in. And then we think about the motivation. We've got to help people understand that the risk and the impact could really impact them. Counter optimism bias, like, yes, you could be a threat too. Or use reciprocity. We've blocked this much, can you do your bit? So So in the research we did with Cardiff University, people thought they were just sorting their inbox, they didn't know it had anything to do with cybersecurity. We just showed a really simple nudge. Well, we actually had 6 or 7 nudges or no nudge. And this was the winning nudge. It's got a bit of threat in it to highlight that it's important. It's got that authority concept with a very precise number. And then the final clause is countering optimism bias. And this was our winning nudge. But all the nudges had an impact in whether people spotted phishing in their inbox. People with the nudges spotted more phishing in their inbox just because they've been primed to be thinking about security. So this brings me to this view of what we've been doing in the world of awareness up to now in the industry. And I don't think we've been acting in the right place. So every decision is going to take place in context. Mostly that's going to be on one of these things, on a computer. There's a decision point and then an action. And we've been trying to help people over here. It's too soon. It's not in the context. You're relying on people remembering it when they come and make their decision. And as I talked about, that's not even how people make those decisions, because they're impacted by context and urgency and things like that. And so they'll be making split decisions a lot of the time without going, how should I interact with this email? I'll just think about my training I did 6 months ago. It's just not how our brains work. And then we've got tools over here. So phishing simulations sit over here, but there are also other tools that are now sort of plugging into your scene to give you a view of behaviours. The problem is all you can really do with that is follow up after the fact. And that gets a bit annoying. It gets a bit naggy. You're kind of being told off. And so it builds reactance of people going, yeah, I was doing that for a perfectly good reason. Leave me alone. And so what we really want to do is be in the context. And that's what from the research we did with Cardiff University and other academics, we wanted to get into the context with our red flags. And so the simplest way of being in the context is just generally in and around your device, reminding you about things. So dropping content straight onto your device, 30 seconds here, 40 seconds there, but also that idea of priming you maybe as you go into a particular application like Outlook. But where it gets really interesting is intervening here. So where you see a behavior actually taking place, I'm about to upload a file, or I'm hovering over a link, or maybe I click the link and I've just started typing my password in. If we can intervene at that point, we can preemptively steer you, educate you, and move you away from that risky behavior. But also empower you to get it right the next time, because it's been a boost. We've kind of pointed out what you should do next time. And obviously, if you can do this to intervene, you can run it silently, create a baseline that says, okay, how often do people forget to lock the screen or something? And then when you run your nudges, you can see that you're really changing people's behavior. And after all, we don't do security awareness fun. I don't think anyone does security awareness for fun. We do it to reduce risk in our organization, to change people's behaviors and make more secure behaviors. So what does this actually look like? So one of the things that we do is we drop these tiny pieces of content just straight onto your desktop. It's very easy to do. It meets that kind of timeliness and salience because it's kind of quite intriguing, and it's available. So it's just kind of security messaging is coming to you so regularly that you are just thinking a bit more about security. It's a bit more front of mind. So very simply, it just looks a bit like this, appears in the back. Interestingly, it's very passive. It actually appears in the background. But despite that, we get 80 to 90% engagement with this content because it's just kind of hanging around on your desktop and it's very easy to do. But in a behavior change campaign, you want to go further than that. So you've dropped some content, you explained a concept, then maybe in week 2 of our campaign, we might drop a reminder in as you open Outlook. It's not actually that big. I've made it that big for presentation purposes, but just that gentle reminder as you go into Outlook, look, we want you to stay safe. Think about who the sender is before you click a link. But then we turn on the real-time nudge, and this is where it gets interesting. Now, I'm sure none of you would click this link, but the moment you're about to, we might deliver a little nudge that says, look, you don't actually know the sender of this email. Are you sure you want to do that? Now, obviously, if you're cyber savvy, this isn't going to stop you. It's a true nudge. It's not stopping you. It's empowering you to make the decision. If you're cyber savvy, you'll go, yeah, no, I've checked that. That's fine. But it's kind of embedding that positive behavior for the future. But if you were on autopilot and this was risky, this could really knock you off that autopilot. Out of your system 1 autopilot into your system 2, go, actually, no, you're right. I don't know that person. I'm going to be a bit more cautious. What's really interesting about this is we need to prove that awareness is working. We need some way of measuring it. And so why are we doing awareness? Well, obviously we're doing it for sort of compliance purposes. We want to prove our awareness is working. We want to show we're reaching people. But really, we want to go further than that. We need to think about, are they engaging? Are they actually changing their behaviors? And am I reducing risk? And so what we have tended to do in the world of awareness is sort of take the easy out and measure the easier thing. have people done their training, which is a measure of performance. What we really want is a measure of effect. Have we actually changed their behaviour by delivering this awareness training? And that's obviously much, much harder to do. But what we can do by delivering these nudges is we can actually track some of this and see that we're changing behaviour. So here's some great stats we've seen. Ones on the left-hand side are related to phishing simulations, but then some much more interesting stats. So this is real clicks in emails from unknown senders. So that's a kind of more macro level risk of reduction. But then if they click, are they entering their entering their password on a website having clicked a link? People remembering to lock their screens, people uploading files. So by delivering these nudges and these interventions, building in a bit of psychology to the way we do it, we're actually steering these behaviours and getting tangible results in risk reduction. It's obviously important that people like this. They don't feel it's too big brother. They feel that it's actually helping them. And we get really positive feedback. This is from Welsh Water, actually, when we surveyed some of their staff. About 500 people answered the survey. And so people were finding it useful and steering their behaviours. This is a very interesting stat. This comes from Dot Martins. Now, if your tagline is rebellious self-expression, then not many people do your mandatory security awareness training. And so they were sitting around at a sort of 26% level. We've been with them about 4 years now. We get 90% month on month because the content just comes to them. Clearly, they've put boots all over it, so it feels like it's the organization messaging them, but it's tiny and short. And that's kind of in tune with the way we're all used to engaging with content nowadays, isn't it? So let's look at some other examples, the sorts of things you could do. So maybe if you actually click the link and then decide to give away your password. So now we're on the website. Again, very subtle nudge, just saying, look, now you're entering a password. You've never had an email from this person before and you've clicked the link, and you've never been to this website before and you're entering your password. Let's just slow down a little bit, please. Obviously uploading files, very generic nudge here. What you would want to do and what we would do is tune this to your organization to say, look, you're uploading to Dropbox. We prefer you to use OneDrive, and here's how. Very common data breach of just kind of putting too many email addresses into the toolbox, just steering people to use BCC. Again, entering corporate email address, so people signing up to Shadow IT. Lots of kind of DLP type stuff. And then this is a really popular one we're using a lot with clients at the moment, which is where the clients are trying to understand who's using LLMs, what are they doing, are they uploading files? And so just a gentle steer to say, look, it's fine to use it, just think about the policy. And so this could be a bigger one that's steering people to the policy. So to sort of bring this together, here's my slightly tongue-in-cheek view of what we've been doing in World of Security Awareness. So initially we thought it was fine to bore people, and I think we've all seen this sort of security awareness training, long videos or PowerPoints, really, really not engaging staff. I think what was being discussed earlier in Gary's presentation. Then we thought it'd be fine to trick them with phishing simulations. I mean, all credit to the vendors there. A great idea. It's been a great money spinner. We all do phishing sims. A study came out only very recently saying that this doesn't work. It's not actually changing people's behaviours. It might be teaching them to spot phishing sims, but is it teaching them to spot real threats? There is a risk with the more data we have and more behavioural data we have that we fall into a nagging mode where once we've seen someone's done something, we're just telling them off after the fact. And that really isn't nudging. Nudging has to come before the fact because it's about setting up the choice architecture to get the better decision. And so obviously you'll be unsurprised to hear my preference is that we start thinking about nudging people. And I think that the next step and where this is going is this concept of something like red flags as your kind of security co-pilot. And we're all getting used to this concept of having agents helping us. It's this idea that it's there side by side with you, helping you make secure decisions as you go through your day. So some final observations. We like to think we make these rational decisions, but actually our brain can't cope with the amount of information thrown at it. So we take shortcuts. And those shortcuts are really useful. I mean, there's a reason why they exist, but they can also mean that we're exposed to risk. So nudging is about kind of using that understanding to steer and guide people to make secure decisions. There's some really good models out there like East, Mindspace. And so if you are communicating, why not use that and just tune your messaging slightly to get a much stronger impact? There's lots of great books I can recommend on stuff like this. The Groom and Vellacott one I talked about, but also Cialdini's book on persuasion and influence. Some really good ideas there on how you just gently steer people to get the outcome you're looking for. what all those models point to is this idea of timeliness and context. And so we want to be as close to the time people are making decisions as we possibly can. If we're too late, it could start getting a bit naggy. So we have to be careful with that as well. And obviously you're doing this to make it measurable. You're trying to baseline behaviours and understand the impact you've had. We have a stand right at the back of the Tiffany room. If you'd like to ask me questions, well, we might have some time for questions now, but if you'd like to talk to the team, see some examples of it running, we also have a quiz where you can win a bottle of Prosecco. Please come and chat to us afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Tim? We're all suitably baffled. I seem to have acquired a beach ball.
I hope they're not baffled.
Any questions? Oh, of course Jen's got a question.
This is a bit of nudge theory. Don't miss your chance.
Is it a sensible question? Because you're making me walk to the back of the room again.
I said you weren't allowed to ask questions.
Have you got a question, or you're just having a stretch? Could you have a question?
Tim, it's not a sensible question.
What a surprise.
There's a really, really famous phrase that starts, "It's Britney." Can you finish it?
It's Britney. No, I can't.
We all whispered it over here, so we know what it is. Anybody else know what it is? Christ, I'm deaf.
I've got quite old children, and so there's just 10 years of culture that I missed out on. I don't think I left the house for 10 years. There's films I'd never seen Gladiator until last week. I just missed out on this entire 10 years of my life. I don't know where I was. But any questions? If not, come and find us at our stand in the Tiffany room, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.